I am Dr. Kevin Polk. I am a clinical psychologist, and I primarily train people in psychological flexibility and psychological safety. The matrix is a diagram of a human being. So we have at the top of it, we have the five senses, like the information coming into us. That ends up inside of us in what's known as our mind. So then we talk about our mind, and we notice the difference between our sensory information and our mental information. So you can notice the difference between your mental processing and your sensory processing.
Well, I came from a pacifist household. And my parents were both from Europe. My mother's from the Basque Country in France, and my father's from Budapest, Hungary, and he was a pacifist and a conscientious objector during World War II. And so I'm very much against guns. I don't believe in carrying a gun. I've never had to carry a gun myself. And I think that people need to learn how to negotiate and they need to learn a conflict resolution instead of picking up a very dangerous weapon that you'll regret using. Most people probably end up regretting using it, and oftentimes it gets in the hands of little children.
My background with guns, well, I've shot a gun before. I don't really have a license to own or operate a gun. Mostly with my father. He is retired law enforcement and was in the Navy and the Coast Guard. I feel guns are a typical part of life. I mean, you need them for protection. Hunting is a huge sport. I think it's a healthy sport. I think that it's sad to see something that was once meant to help humans sustain life turn into something really bad.
Up until about 4 years ago, I was the national sales manager of one of the nation's leading manufacturers of firearms. Present day is the same as been my entire life. I support the Second Amendment. Both Maine also has a Second Amendment type version in it and Maine Constitution, and I'm a strong supporter of people owning firearms if they so choose. At this point, I would say it would take a lot to change my opinion, and I don't see that happening. People are entitled to their opinion. I unfortunately find in interviews I've done and things I've got involved in the past, through the fact that I was a legislator a couple of times here in Maine, most of the problem with firearms is they just don't understand. It's lack of education, and I'm sure when we get into this documentary, a lot of this will come out, and I can explain a lot of things why people are afraid of guns when they really shouldn't be. I'm going in with no expectations. I'm going in open-minded to listen to what other people have to say, and hopefully they will respect my opinion.
I'm Tom, and I live in Portland. I'm originally from New Jersey. I've lived in Maine for about 35 years. I don't like guns. I've been a vegetarian since I was 17. At the time I became a vegetarian, I was a vegetarian because I didn't think it was necessary to kill animals in order to live. If it were necessary, like on an island or something where I couldn't think of anything else to do, I would do it, but I'm really not in favor of preparing or trying to kill anything or anybody. So guns to me seem useless. I don't see any purpose for military. These questions about the military and the police are good ones because this is the world that we live in. And, a practical person would say, well, and then it gives the position that, guns are okay. But I think just the attitude that you have to take a violent response to something is always going to be problematic. There is always going to be violence as long as everybody believes in it. And you could take the position that everybody is going to believe in it, it's never going to change. So arm yourself. But I don't want to live in a world like that. So it's what I think about and the way I focus my mind that matters to me, and how I think of the world. I think of the world as peaceful, and I would prefer to perpetuate that. And if I die in the process because I'm not able to defend myself, so be it.
Started out hunting when I was 8 with my father, and went through a period of time in my teens where I didn't go hunting. Picked it back up in my 30s, actually with bow hunting instead of with rifles and stuff. And then I started to conceal carry, and went through training programs with that, and that's pretty much where we are today. Well, I carry a gun. I don't have too much of an opinion on people that don't, other than if something happens, they can't protect themselves. So I really don't have an opinion on if somebody carries or not. I just choose to because of the situations I know that I might get into, and protection for my family and myself. People control the guns don't control the people. So it's like anything else. If you have a car, you can use it as a weapon, so I don't really try to change other people's opinions. It's personal for them. So.
My name is Jill. I grew up in Illinois and I live in Maine. I've been here for over 40 years. I grew up in a household where my dad was a hunter. Of course, I was a young kid and I never saw a gun. I know he went hunting on various different occasions with his friends, but I never saw a weapon. I know he had guns, we never saw them, so it wasn't something that was talked about, and I don't think my dad engaged in any kind of dangerous behavior. I think we were safe, that they were locked up and that sort of thing. I had grandparents and uncles who hunted. That was pretty much it. I'm very concerned because I think we have an epidemic of gun violence in this country, and it's frightening, and I think we need to do something about it. I don't think there's anything that could change my opinion about what's going on in this country right now. I'm certainly willing to listen to the other viewpoint, and one of my hopes with this documentary is to be able to talk to people who have different views and maybe come to some understanding of each other.
So growing up, my father was a casual hunter, I don't think he ever even actually killed anything. So he kept a rifle in the house, I assume. And then my husband's we've been married about 7 years. My husband's father he's a hunter, so he has lots of guns in his house. And then my husband also had some guns when we first got married. So I definitely believe that people can own guns. I am very, I don't know the word, I'm very careful about, I would say that my biggest issue is letting my kids go over people's houses. So I want to make sure that people are smart about guns and they're safe about them, especially when it comes to children. So I'm fine with people owning guns. I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of people carrying guns around, like in purses or handbags. But definitely, currently I have young kids, so it's really about my kids.
Today is going to be super easy. We're going to learn this diagram. And it's a diagram about psychological flexibility. And along the way, you'll discover what that is. So today, we're going to learn this. We're going to learn how to do this. You may have noticed this question up here. It says, who's important to you? And that's where the diagram starts. So, anybody, who's important to you?
Family.
Family.
Friends.
Friends.
People you're responsible for.
Like caregiving.
Well, no, I'm the boss. I have workers and stuff like that. So.
I can do the whole thing. I know what you mean.
Is your self-assumed?
Yes, exactly.
My community.
Community, there you go. We got family, friends. Anybody got any children out there?
Siblings.
Siblings are very important. I'll put one down, I'll say my wife. Now this side over here is where we put the things that can show up inside of us and get in the way of moving toward who's important to us. Anybody know?
Fear.
Fear, right. But fear shows up and can get in the way. What other kind of stuff can show up and get in the way?
Anger.
Anger. It's funny, a lot of times people struggle with coming up with anger, but that is a huge thing that shows up and gets in the way of moving toward
Depression.
depression can indeed.
How about confusion?
Confusion, there we go. That is a huge one, by the way. Stress in general, exactly.
How about resentment?
Resentment is a huge one, yes. Carry those grudges.
Knowledge?
What's that?
Ignorance or lack of
A
knowledge?
lack of knowledge could show up and get in the way.
Jealousy.
The green-eyed monster. And you'll notice everything down here is down here in the mental category. Okay? So it's inside of you. In my world, sometimes we call it private events. And so unless you speak it out loud or show it in a behavior some way, we can't see it. They're hidden from us. Now when we go up here to the top part of the diagram, and this where it says senses, what that means is that other people can see you doing it. For example, I can see all of you doing something right now.
Sitting.
And you can see me standing, right. I mean, if you were just listening to me on an audio tape, you really wouldn't know if I was sitting or standing. So, observable things that you can see. So, a lot of this stuff doesn't feel good. In general, like if you think of like fear, fear takes center stage here. It doesn't feel good. And if you were like a kid, especially, and fear showed up inside of you, what would you probably do?
Run away.
Run away. Ta-dum. And that's it. And it gets diagrammed like this. And it usually works. How about jealousy? What do people do about jealousy?
What causes rage?
Rage, that's one thing. So you're in a group of people, and some of the people that you're talking to are jealous of somebody else outside the group. What might they do?
Talk about them.
Talk about them, otherwise known as gossip, that humans tend to like to do. Embarrassment. What might we do for embarrassment? Try and get rid of that.
Blushing and stuff.
Blush.
Facial
We
expressions.
can definitely see you blush. All things that the purpose of them is to try and relieve some of this stuff. I mentioned wine. Has anybody ever thought about taking a drink for any of that? How about for stress? Maybe mention stress. Anybody? Have you? Maybe nobody in this room, but you've heard of people
Take
that
a stimulant,
have.
cut cigarettes, biting fingernails. All that.
Right. Okay. So I'll put the drink and smoke, etc. Now that gets in that realm too. That you're feeling all of that stuff, and you would like to feel a whole lot less of it or none at all, and then you might do something other than just the usual behavioral things. Just to point out, like especially for stress, people might well exercise, right? And so in that way, it's to move away from the stress. It's to relieve the stress. But you get the idea of the range of human behaviors that people do to lessen this, what I oftentimes call yucky feeling stuff on the inside of you. It feels yucky, you want to get rid of it, so we do something to get rid of it. And finally, we have our lonely upper right quadrant here, and this is where we put the stuff that's initially that moves us toward who's important to you. That we could all see you do, that would move you toward your spouse.
Take her out to supper.
Take her out to supper. You betcha.
Show of affection.
Show of affection. How about children?
Holding the hand.
Old hand. What else do children like?
Go play with them out in the
Play.
Ice cream, playgrounds.
They love to be played. My wife will love that ice cream as a toward move.
How about just spending quality time?
Spending quality time, exactly. Oftentimes just put as spend time.
Tell people they're important to you or what they mean to you?
You bet. The things that you do that, for sure, the purpose of them is to move you toward who's important to you. So what we end up with all of this is when you do this kind of behavior as a human, it oftentimes ends up with some type of feeling of satisfaction. Where on this side, you get relief. And so in general, this set of behaviors is to get relief, from something yucky inside of you. And in general, this set of behaviors is to get satisfaction or something related to satisfaction. Just a tiny little bit more about it. The senses up here. Anybody recall the 5 senses?
Smell.
Sight, touch, taste.
Hearing.
Hearing. Those are the 5 senses. And that's where the information that you use comes in. That's that part of the world. And going along at the very same time of those inputs into the world is your mental experience. And do any of you have what's known as a chatterbox mind? This sort of keeping up an ongoing dialogue with you. Don't feel alone. Everybody does. It's this running commentary going along. And if you're like most people, it's totally positive, no negative. I was winking at you a lot. Because it's actually the total opposite of what I just said. It's always, bugging at you. It oftentimes gets called the tormentor. And there's this big difference between your sensory information coming in and this mental stuff that's going on. And every once in a while it's a good idea to compare the two. What's coming in through my 5 senses versus what's my mind up to at any point. And so, now, the last thing is this word called noticing. You notice the difference between your 5 senses experiencing versus your mental experiencing. Sometimes they're lined up pretty good, sometimes not so good. And the other thing to notice is how it feels to do one of these toward moves versus how it feels to do one of these relief moves of something has frightened you so you move away or for whatever. I oftentimes call it yucky stuff. I'm a psychologist, so I can use those really complicated terms. And you notice the difference between how this relief feels versus how this satisfaction feels. And with that, noticing all of that stuff at once, almost invariably, people become what's known as more psychologically flexible. It's the ability to go ahead and do this kind of stuff, even though this kind of stuff is showing up inside of you. So basically, your tormentor is got you on the yucky side of life, and you say, well, okay, tormentor, I'm taking you along with me, and I'm going ahead and doing something for my family or whatever I'm doing. And it's that almost behavioral definition of the ability to have this stuff and do the toward stuff at the same time. Now, if you're like me, you automatically remember to practice everything that you need to do, right? All of this is about looking inside of you and saying, what's my motivation? What's the purpose of what I'm doing right now? How many of people in here drive? And as you were driving around, did you notice that everybody else are really good drivers.
Which road?
Okay, maybe you noticed something else. Maybe you noticed that they weren't all really good drivers. As a matter of fact, some of them were downright hideous drivers, right? So that you're going along, minding your own business, pretty day like this, and maybe somebody cuts you off. I mean, severely cuts you off so that you have to slam on your brakes. Okay. And then I want to add a little more to this. You look over at them, and they laugh at you and give you some obscene gesture and drive away. And now I get to ask you the psychologist question. How do you feel in that scenario?
Insanely angry.
I like that. Right. Insanely angry. Right.
I'm happy because karma will get to them.
This is reverse psychology. Karma's going to get your. Oh yeah, I love it.
It all depends on how you deal with that fear, because when they do that, it scares you for a second.
It scares you.
You got to read the situation, and then you can either get ticked off or feel like they're an idiot. It's kind of your response. It's up to you on how you
That's
deal
true.
with it.
That's very true.
It could have been a
However,
reasonable mistake, or
whatever it was,
maliciously.
whatever the scenario was, maybe you get home and your spouse or friend or neighbor or somebody's right there in the driveway, and you get out, and more than likely, what's the first thing you tell them about? It's a great story, right? You're not going to believe this idiot cut me off, right? And it's a story, and those stories are what are known as hooks. We call them hooks. And a hook is nothing more than something that emotionally grabs you and then sticks with you for a while. Every human being I've ever presented this to have had hooks, okay? And so, do you think that you would be so fortunate as to have the opportunity to notice a hook showing up in your life between now and a week from now? And if not, just go drive around until you see one. Right? That'd be wasting gas, don't you? But maybe you have teenagers. Maybe your spouse hooks you every once in a while. It happens. I like that look on your face. Right. There's all kinds of hooks out there. Whatever the hook. And remember, it emotionally grabs you, and it's something like you're going to carry it forward. You're going to notice the hook, but now it's taken on this new life form for you. You're then going to be reminded of this diagram. That's what it's for. That's why I'm belaboring this a little bit, is to get it to where hooks then are related to you remembering, oh yeah, that diagram about who's important to me, the yucky stuff that shows up inside of me, the away moves that I do to reduce the yucky stuff, the toward moves that I do to move toward who and what's important to me. And in those moments, you will, of course, be noticing. You don't have to worry about the noticing. It'll just happen. And the easiest way to do this is to notice these hooks, is to get to where when a hook shows up, it reminds you of all the rest of it. A handy thing to remember also is to notice your five senses experiencing during the hook. And that's really all you have to do. Your homework is to notice hooks. The great thing about this homework is you can either do the homework or not do the homework, and either way works. And then you will come back next time, and one of the very first things we will do is review the hooks that you've noticed. And if you haven't, just about the time that I start talking about them, you'll remember them anyway. So, not to leave you in the dark. You'll remember them anyway, even if you sort of forget between now and then. But most people do. There's quite a few hooks out there in life. I would start with who's important to you. always start off on the most basic of human levels. That's the trick of this. If anybody wants to know, there is nothing. Let me back up. If you work with people who are dying, or if you don't want to do that, just go read the literature about people who are dying and their deathbed confessions, or whatever you want to say. What almost everybody says, over 90% of people say, I wish I had spent more time with my loved ones. Okay? Hence the question, who's important to you? Because that's the most important question. That's the biggie. That's your end of life question. That's where you're moving toward with your life. And so now all this other stuff is important, yeah, but it's not quite as important as that. And so then you see everybody going, oh my goodness, this is wild. We're all responding to fear. Everybody is responding to the same emotion in a different way. So it's basically, oh my, I'm afraid, I'm gonna go get a gun. Oh my, I'm afraid, I'm gonna go get away from guns.
We're all saying the same thing, it just comes out a little different. We're all feeling the same way, it just sounds a little different. We all want some peace of mind, it just comes out a little different. I want more time, I want more money, I want someone to call me home.
Can't wait to see you.
I want more space, I want more freedom. If there's a God, I'd like to meet him. 'Cause I got questions.
Okay, ready?
We're all saying the same thing, it just comes out.
They see the cameras and they're walking into the shot.
We're all feeling the same way, it just sounds a little different. We all want some peace of mind, it just comes out a little different. No need to worry about what I'm thinking when you're talking, I'm just listening. Life's not some pie we're fighting over till we're resting 'neath the clover. Yeah, it just grows, it just grows. We're all saying the same thing, it just comes out a little different. We're all feeling the same way, it just sounds a little different. We all want some peace of mind, it just comes out